And can you believe we're back again, Tyler?
I am so excited about this week's episode.
Well, that makes one of us.
Okay, well, I'm glad that I'm present.
Well, it's good to be back. This is Justin and Tyler, Classic Vinyl Podcast, and today we are going to be reviewing the Zombies-Odessey and Oracle.
Zombies.
No, wrong zombie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's a song, but different.
Rob Zombie.
No, wrong zombie.
I'm lost.
Yes, you are.
I've always been lost.
But Odessey and Oracle is kind of an interesting album because, as we'll get into a little later, it's considered kind of a cult classic and one of the better albums of all time, and we'll decide what we both think of that when it gets to the end. But let me get right into it and give a little bit of history on the band.
Buckle up, hippies.
Here we go. So the Zombies, they're a British rock band. They were formed in 1961, obviously in England, which that's what makes them British.
Mm-hmm.
They consist of Colin Blunstone on vocals, Rod Argent, keyboardist and vocals, and Rod Argent famously is also known for forming the band Argent, which had a pretty big hit with Hold Your Head Up. I think a lot of people know that song. He formed that after this band had disbanded. I believe it was 1969. Paul Atkinson on guitars, Hugh Grundy on drums, and originally was Paul Arnold on bass, but he was quickly replaced by Chris White very early in the band's history. Now, the band's name originally was the Mustangs, but they had to change the band name because apparently, we hear this all the time. Bands have these names and then they have to change it because they find out there was another band under that name.
Yeah.
And so they changed it to the Zombies. They actually signed a contract with Decca Records in 1962. And, shortly after that, had a pretty big hit. Hit number 12 with She's Not There. It hit number 12 in the UK, but actually hit number 2 in the US. It was certified gold in the US as a single as well. So they hit it off pretty quick. They're one of the bands of the famous British invasion. They came to the US and toured the US in 1965. All in all, the band has released 9 studio albums, but let's be real, they really only released 2 albums in the 60s. And then they had a third one they had recorded in the 60s, but it didn't get released until the year 2000.
Oh, wow.
And they have released 7 other albums as a band or different forms of the band, but those all come after 1990, so we try not to count them, right?
What the hell else are they holding on to?
I'm not quite sure. They had, out of the singles released, they had 3 singles in the top 10. She's Not There, that I just told you about, hit number 2. Time of the Season hit number 3, which is on this album. Tell Her No hit number 6. They had a total of 6 singles that charted, which isn't too bad for 2 studio albums, really, let's be honest.
Sure. But it's a little surprising because when you listen to this album, these guys are very exemplary of the British invasion sound.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I agree and disagree with that. Mm-hmm. But we'll get into that more. I think certain songs of theirs are, but other ones are way off base as far as I'm concerned. But that could just be a matter of taste, right?
Sure.
They did have 1 EP. In 1964, they've released 6 live albums, and like we've spoken a lot of times, this band had 20 compilation albums. Most of those came way before they released all these later albums, so these are greatest hits and things like that. So you can look at that as laughable, or you can say, that's pretty impressive that the band, can release 2 studio albums in the 60s, and off of that get 20 compilation albums.
I chuckle, but man, that is impressive.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Because that's successful. Those albums sold.
Yeah, so the band on this album we're doing tonight, which was their second studio album, the band split soon after this album in 1967, and they got together again for a short time in 1969 without the lead singer, Colin Blunstone, and it just didn't last.
Yeah.
And they've had multiple reunions over the years, here and there, different things going on. But there are 4 surviving members got back together in 2017 to tour for the 50th anniversary of this album, Odessey and Oracle. It's Paul Atkinson that died. He died in 2004. So this band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019 after being nominated 3 previous times. Now, this is where I have a big problem with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Nothing against the Zombies, but
sure.
The amount they've released and what they've done, and you compare them to some other bands like Foreigner and some of these other bands that are huge and never even been hinted at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's kind of a shame.
Yeah. This is a little obscure to be in there when there's so many other ones that aren't.
Yeah, and I consider myself a hypocrite a little bit because every time we talk about an album, I tell you about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I tell you how much I think it's a joke. I tell you about Rolling Stone's list and how much it's a joke, but I guess I'll just continue to be hypocritical.
Yeah.
That's just me, right?
Well, we got to have some sort of a ruler to measure this by, right?
Exactly. So they're still touring today with Rod Argent, Colin Blunstone, Steve Rodford, Tom Toomey, and Soren Koch. I don't know where those guys come from, but that's just a brief history of the band.
Soren, that's like a Swedish name.
Yeah.
Scandinavia.
Yeah, it's something like that. So do you want to get to the album review?
Let's do it.
And now it's time for the album review.
Okay, so we're doing the Zombies, Odessey and Oracle, and Odessey is spelled incorrectly, which we'll get to.
Odessey.
Yes, as opposed to Odyssey.
That's right.
This is the second studio album released from the Zombies. It was released on April 19th of 1968. It was released by CBS Records in the UK and Date Records in the US. So this was recorded at the famous EMI studios that are known as Abbey Road Studios now, and partially recorded at Olympic Studios, both in London. And when at EMI, they actually used the same 4-track recording machine that the Beatles used on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
That's why it sounds like the Beatles.
And see, that's where I think you're completely wrong and you're pissing me off.
I am going to piss you off.
But we'll get to that. So it was produced by the Zombies themselves, and the Zombies on this album, once again, are Colin Blunstone on vocals, Paul Atkinson on guitar, Rod Argent on keyboard and vocals, Chris White on bass and some vocals, and Hugh Grundy on drums.
Yeah. Paul Atkinson's Rowan Atkinson's little brother, right?
Yes, he must be.
Yeah.
So critics originally dismissed this album, not as a poor album, not as a great album. It was just simply dismissed. You know, it was just
kind of panned.
Yeah. And they said it was okay, but that was about it. But over the years, it's gained quite a cult following, which I, Justin, for one, do not understand. And I wanted to give this album a try because I do know the Zombies hits, right?
Yeah. This is hippie fuel.
Yeah. I don't know. We're going to get into all this, but I've listened to this album a time or two in the past, but not sat down and listened to it seriously. And this was my first time, really.
Sure.
So I want to know what all the hubbub was about it. And I have my feelings on
now
this. So,
you know.
Yeah.
Or maybe you don't.
You know, they originally said Odessey on the album title was spelled incorrectly. I think they were saying it was a deliberate play on words to the word ode.
Odessey.
But it did come out later that was all a lie, and it was just misspelled.
Just poor spelling.
And they just had to roll with it, right?
What dumbass again. Well, then again, they didn't have spell check back then, so.
And this is similar in one way. I wrote this note to the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, which we did release episode on earlier.
Yeah.
Where it was overlooked at its time of release, but has become a classic today, according to a lot of people. I'd like to know who those people are and talk to them, but
yeah. But similar to Pet Sounds in that these guys actually have a Beach Boys harmony going on with them.
A little bit in some things you hear it. It's not as heavy as the Beach Boys, but you do hear that little bit of harmony. There's a couple songs that, and I wrote those in the notes. Going through Rolling Stone, they've ranked this album all over the place, but it's been as high as number 80 in their top 500. Now, this album charted in the US and not in the UK, but it just barely charted in the US at number 95. Now, the cover, it's a very psychedelic looking cover. It's really hard to explain.
It's a lot easier to explain if you drop acid or take some mushrooms.
Yeah, and this band notoriously is known for not being into drugs at all, being pretty straight.
Yeah, but the album is, well, I guess all of the drugs are in the album cover.
They must be. It's
because it looks like LSD.
Yeah, the album cover was painted by a friend of Chris White named Terry Quirk. And I'd suggest if you want to see it, go look it up, or maybe you already know what it looks like. But do you want to get to side one?
Yep, spin it.
Side one.
Okay, so side one opens up with a song called Care of Cell 44. Now, this is a song written by Rod Argent, sang by Colin Blunstone. It's basically about a guy writing to his girlfriend who's still in prison. He's wanting to get her back. Its working title originally was called The Prison Song, which fits.
Yeah, but why is she in prison? That's what we want to find out.
Yeah, that would be the good thing to know, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but they'd never tell you.
Now, this was released as the first single off this album. It did not chart in the UK or the US. It is the longest song on the album, just barely under 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on this song?
I think it's understandable that it did not chart.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
It's a weird love song. This I find listening to Rod Argent authored songs, he's kind of like a songwriter version of Tim Burton. He's got a little dark side to him that's a little weird. Like, this is a real sweet little love song, and I mean, this could be a Beatles love ballad, except it's got that little detail that she's in prison. Why is she in prison? We don't know. Was it shoplifting? Was it an assault on him? He's just some abuse victim waiting for her to get out. Who knows? It's a real happy-go-lucky sounding song juxtaposed with a darkness in the theme. It's so good. But once again, they've got this sound that could be Beatles, could be Beach Boys, and you're going to hate that, but they've got this harmony that sounds very much like the British invasion. But it's not something that the Beatles or the Beach Boys would sing about. They're not going to sing about being in love with someone who's in prison.
Well, now the Beach Boys, keep in mind, they weren't part of the British invasion.
No, they weren't. But these guys have that harmony sound like the Beach Boys do. I really want to find out why she was in prison.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
So what are your thoughts on it?
You know, this song wasn't too bad, and I do not get angry at you saying a Beach Boys and a Beatles sound, because I kind of thought there were sections of this song that sounded like Penny Lane from the Beatles. I thought the harmonies, I wrote strict on my notes here, the harmonies remind me of the Beach Boys a little bit. It's got a piano intro that goes into the drums. I think the song is mixed a little muddy. It's kind of hard to hear the lyrics. It's a good little pop song. It's got good bass in it. The way I look at it, it's a good little pop song with a dark subject.
Yeah.
And you probably wouldn't even know it because it's mixed so muddy unless you were really sitting down and paying attention to the lyrics. But yeah, we got to know what this chick's in prison for.
Yeah.
What's going on? You know, or maybe that's a metaphor. Who knows? Maybe she's not, maybe she was just grounded by her parents or something.
I don't know. The whole thing, it was going to be called the prison song, and then it's Care of Cell 44. This really sounds like they're literally singing about someone in prison.
Yeah, it does.
She's doing a nickel.
It wasn't too bad of a song. I mean, it had, even though there's parts of it that, makes me think of Penny Lane or the Beach Boys, it just doesn't quite come together.
It doesn't.
It's just kind of weird.
Yeah.
So,
and like I said, it's kind of that Tim Burton writing music. It's just a little odd.
Yeah. So it moves us on to the second song on the album, A Rose for Emily. Now, this song was written by Rod Argent again and sang by Colin Blunstone. The title is based on a short story of the same name by American author William Faulkner. It was a book he published in 1930 that was about necrophilia.
How about that? That dark theme again.
Yeah, there you go. Now they said it has nothing to do with the book, but they just stole the title. I don't know about that because the song does focus on Emily's romantic isolation and things. What are your thoughts on this one?
It very much about that, Emily's romantic isolation, and they sing about her as though she could. I mean, if you think about her being a corpse while they're singing this, it fits. If you think about her not being a corpse, it fits too. But it fits a little bit easier if you think about her being a corpse.
Maybe she died in her cell.
She could. Yeah, could be. Once again, this is another sweet little love song. But our Tim Burton of songwriting, Rod Argent, he's made it just a little weird, just a little odd, thrown that dark element in that theme. Maybe he didn't. He's gonna say that he didn't and argue that he didn't, but I still call him Tim Burton. It fits to me. All in all, not an unpleasant song to listen to, but I'd say it's not my favorite. It's just, it fits the album. I'll tell you that. What did you think about it?
I mean, it's okay. You're right. It fits the album. It's got another piano intro on it. It's got decent harmonies, which I thought were the best thing about it. There's not a rose left for her grave. I know that. They say that in the lyrics. The one reason I don't sense British invasion on these songs is because we're yet to hear a guitar.
Yeah.
And that's something I've either got to have from a group or they've got to show me something super special, a la Pet Sounds, to make up for it. And I'm just not getting that so far in this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's an upbeat song again, kind of. It's kind of an upbeat love song, but once again, it's a dark subject. Nothing really to write home to for me.
Yeah, I had to wait 2 more songs before I picked up the guitar of that British Invasion sound.
Yeah. So the next song's Maybe After He's Gone. This one's written by Chris White and sang by Colin Blunstone. It's basically written about a guy clinging to a lost love, you know, and he's thinking, okay, maybe after I'm gone, she will come back and love me again. I don't even know what that means. I don't know if that's meaning once he's dead or if he's leaving the home. I don't know. Is this dark? What are your thoughts on this one?
My thoughts on this one are that this is just wishful thinking. This is a guy who was dating a little out of his league. He lost out. She was stolen away by another guy. But this guy doesn't really have an understanding of women as being individual people, which is probably why she left him in the first place. What he sees is like, well, that guy's taking a turn with my girl, and then as soon as he leaves, then she's going to come back to me. Wishful thinking, bud. It's not going to happen. She's gone. She's gone for good. You need to move on. I'm psychoanalyzing the crap out of this song.
Yes, you are.
I am. You know, this band, this song has that piano again, and it's a really good sound. This song really gets that harmony, and where they do the harmonizing like the Beach Boys, and it's a good sound. Yeah, this guy is a total beta male. He lost to the alpha, and she's not coming back. I don't think so. What did you think?
Kind of a little bit of the same. I did get a hint of guitar in the intro, but there's a lot of piano in this song once again, and that's the 3rd song in a row with a lot of piano. I don't have a problem with piano, but it should be used a little bit differently in rock and roll and maybe sparingly to a certain thing. It's got a decent mixed bass in the song. The drums you can barely hear. They're mixed poorly to the back. I did put that I thought the harmonies were the best thing about this song. There's good harmonies in this song. Yeah. And that's something you mentioned as well. So I think that was one thing about this song. But for me, this is on par with the previous 2. Nothing special, nothing that all 3 of these songs so far through the album that I would really go back to.
The piano seems like it really softens it up, and it softens it to the point that, is this rock and roll?
Yeah.
It's still rock and roll, but that piano really...
It does.
Yeah, it waters it down.
So the next song is Beechwood Park, written by Chris White, sang by Colin Blunstone. And this is a very cinematic sounding song. And it's basically singing about a love in the park and days they spent there, you know, and about geography and weather being tangible, which is kind of a theme in this album, right?
Yeah.
And Beechwood Park is actually a real place in Flamstead, Hertfordshire, England, where the band's actually from. So they had written this song, or Chris White had written the song about his days spent in the park and I guess reflecting. What are your thoughts on this one? This
one's a very British sounding song. This is the song where I first get that British Invasion sound, where I'm like, okay, this is a band from England singing about home from a favorite memory of days gone by. Just reflecting on that. This is a song where when homesickness sets in when they're on tour, they're going to pull it out and play it. It's got that harmonizing ending, but this is very much that British rock of the era. But there's just something about it that really is reminiscent of a sound that I hear from a lot of the bands from Britain during this time. Am I wrong?
I don't really get a British sound from this. I thought this sounded very much like Love and Forever Changes, more specifically, that we once reviewed. And Love had come out with Forever Changes about, I believe, 6 months previous to this album. And this song reminded me of that very much. So whether Love was copying a British sound or these guys were copying Love, I don't know. But it did sound similar.
Now that you mention it, yeah.
It does have somewhat of a haunting keyboard throughout, which it's kind of cool sounding, but it doesn't go with the rest of the song very well. It's almost, it stuck out a little bit to me. It's got some cool tremolo sounds that are kind of cool little additions to it. And once again, I thought this song was okay. It didn't have a lot of piano in it like the previous 3 songs, but it really wasn't anything special to me. You know, it didn't jump out at me. That brings us to the next song, Brief Candles. Now, this one was written by Chris White, and this is sang by Colin Blunstone, Rod Argent, and Chris White all together. The title comes from a short story from Aldous Huxley, which I've read a couple of his books. Very interesting. It's basically telling a story about a breakup and how the love they had burned out as time went by, basically like a candle, right? What are your thoughts on this one?
This is a really good song that made me think a lot. It starts off with an a cappella opening, and once again, we get that really strong harmonizing from these guys, and they're really good. This is a song about a guy who thought he could do better, so he broke up with his girl, but then as a result of that, she worked on herself. She's the one who ended up thriving while he floundered. And then he goes pining for her, wanting her back, but she's moved on. Time would show him that he also needs to work on himself and move on. There is no going back. That relationship's over. And that's kind of the whole thing about the brief candles, is that when we get together in these short little relationships, if it's not a perfect fit, then they're not the one. Move on. That's kind of what it is you can burn these little flames, these little candles, but as soon as the wick is gone, then accept it and move on. I really enjoyed this song. Once again, I'm psychoanalyzing the crap out of this band, but this song sounds really nice too. It's a pleasant rock and roll. Usually I'm not a fan of the acapella, but these guys do their harmonizing. I think that they do this on purpose. They drop the backup instruments in order to focus on their voice, and I don't mind it the way I would with modern a cappella groups. I like this song. What did you think?
Well, it's definitely another piano song, which makes basically 4 out of 5 on this album being heavy piano. The a cappella portion, although I thought the harmonies were good, I didn't really like it. I liked when it kicked into the chorus because it kicks in with good bass. And it's like a quick, heavy British sounding pop song. And then it kicks back down to the acapella and back and forth. And so I thought the harmonies were good, but it didn't fit with the chorus.
True.
I thought the whole song should have been kind of based off of what the chorus sounded like to be a fast, speedy song. I just didn't like the verses with piano only in the acapella, but I did like the verses in this song. And the verses in this song are my favorite thing on this album to this point. So that brings us to Hung Up on a Dream, the next song. It's written by Rod Argent and sang by Colin Blunstone. Now, this song supposedly has a heavy psychedelic bridge and chorus. I don't, and people have said that in reviews and things, and it's okay. I still get another Love feeling on this, the band Love. And most people think this song is about the summer of love and how those ideals were only instilled in young people in a very naive train of thought to those ideals.
Yeah.
And it's kind of about that. What are your thoughts on this one?
Grow up hippies is the note that I have written down.
Yeah,
here,
that's basically, yeah.
Exactly. Starts. There's the piano again. Piano again opening. The guitar bridge has a very classic sound to it. I really like that guitar bridge. The psychedelicness or the psychedelia of it. Yeah, there's a little bit, but I wouldn't say that, oh man, this is the epitome of psychedelic. No, it fits, but I mean, this is a song about hippies, the summer of love, young, strong, and free. It's a good song about that, summer of love, but it's a song for a very special time. There's a couple of things that bother me about it, because this is kind of a mess of sound, and the way that they mixed it, I feel like the singing gets drowned out, so I can't really follow it. What did you think about that?
Well, that was one of my main notes I wrote on this, is that this is mixed very muddy, and it's very tough to hear the lyrics.
Oh, so I'm not the only one.
No,
Okay.
so I echo that with you. But once again, it's another heavy piano-driven song, so that's 5 out of 6. And to me, that's just overkill on it instead of making things sound a little different. Once again, like I stated, this sounds like Love a little bit to me, but not done as well. It does have a good bass line in it. The drums are very faint, and I don't know if that's just because that's the way they were mixed or what. You can hear them, but they're very faint. And there is a tiny hint of a guitar solo in there that was kind of promising, but didn't really lead to much. But it was okay. The mixing on this album so far, as we finish out side 1, I think has been poor. And I think the piano has been used way, way too much. That's my opinion.
Sure.
So
Here's what I have to say about side 1. Hippies don't play the piano. They play their guitars. They play drum circles out in the park. Put the guitar, put the drums in.
Well, I like a piano song just as much as anybody else here and there, but I just don't want the whole album to be piano driven.
Sure.
Right?
It's a little too I don't know what they're trying to do. I'm not even sure what word I'm looking for. It doesn't really fit.
Do you want to go to side 2?
Yeah, flip the album.
Side 2.
Okay, so side 2 of the album opens up with a song called Changes. Now, this one was written by Chris White again, sang by Colin Blunstone. And basically about placing the moods of a woman in context of the changing seasons. Basically talking about a girl that changes a lot, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're saying she has split personalities or what he's saying here. Maybe that's a nice way to say it. And, the lyrics really do reflect sadness about how time has changed and how, Chris White's written of how he has loved her and everything's changed. I don't know. It's kind of strange in that way. Yeah. But what are your thoughts on this one?
It's got good music to it. I like the way that it's composed. The lyrics are not bad. They're very thought-provoking lyrics. He says, I knew her when summer was her crown. And then, he also later on says that he knew her when winter was her cloak. And some things like that. I'm not exactly sure what he's saying about that, but I guess summertime is the time when she shines. I do say, once again, strongly psychoanalyzing this band, this is a big reason why I encourage people to date for a minimum of a year before getting married. And that's so that you can see them in all of the seasons, not just the seasons of the year, but you have to see them in all the seasons of the year in order to see them in all the seasons of their personality and moods and all that. So give it time, get to know the person. Is that what this song is about? I have no idea. But I'm just looking way too much into the writing, and it's a song that I enjoyed, but there's this, was it a flute or an oboe? There's some sort of a wind instrument.
I don't know if it was a flute or the sound of a keyboard that opens it, which was what I was going to get into, is at least it wasn't a piano this time.
Hey, yeah, we changed it from percussion string to wind.
And I do like the imagery of some of the lyrics, peppermint coat, button-down clothes. I mean, there's good imagery in the lyrics. The harmonies, once again, are good in this, which that, so far for me, 8 songs into the album, the harmonies are the only thing to write home about. But it's a very strange song, once again. Very, I wouldn't even say dark, but just hard for me to understand what's going on.
It's hard to grasp. They don't really get their point across.
Yeah, and then they do the flute or the keyboard or whatever that is on the outro, and it's nothing special to me. I'm hoping for more on side 2 than what I got on side 1. So far, the opening isn't a good start. So the next song is I Want Her, She Wants Me. This one's written by Rod Argent again, sang by Colin Blunstone. This is a little bit more of an upbeat song, and I did write in my initial notes that the song is a little more upbeat, like the Beatles' Penny Lane. It's probably the one most similar to the Beatles, even though I got angry at you for saying that. It's upbeat a little more. And it's, this song's talking about the wonder and comfort of a first love that you think is very secure, but this song also hints at the girl's side of the story, who's warning her lover about, the relationship may fail like one of her previous relationships that she may still be in love with.
She's a little wiser.
Yeah. I think she just got out of prison, and so she's
on the rebound.
Yeah, she's on the rebound. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think that this guy is the rebound. Rod Argent. Oh, I love this Tim Burton guy. He's got that theme, and there's so much repetition of this. I want her, she wants me. I want her, she wants me. Is he repeating himself so much that he's trying to convince himself of that?
Especially at the outro, he repeats it over like 30 times.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just straight. There is a sound in here where I swear it could be Paul McCartney singing Penny Lane. I don't know if Colin Blunstone intentionally parodied or parroted Paul McCartney that way. It really sounded like it. But yeah, this is a song about a girl who's carrying a torch, and she's a little wise. He's still naive and wishful thinking. This is one of his first relationships, and he's hoping that this is going to last forever because she wants him and he wants her, and yeah, he wants her and she wants me, right? This was a song where it made me think of my dad. Okay, I'm gonna share a little personal story here. My dad was dating a girl back at the time that this album was released, she ended up getting with somebody else and marrying somebody else, and he lost her. Well, just this year, my dad married her. So, I mean, this has been a long time coming. This song is my dad's theme song. That being said, I haven't favorited it, or at least favorited it yet, but we'll get to that later on. Where did this song hit you, Justin?
Well, this is the first song. We had to wait till song number 8 that we didn't really have a piano intro. It has a good bass intro, and it has good bass throughout. I thought that was the shining thing in this song. This is a more poppy British invasion sounding song. You know, I like the keyboard used throughout the song. The only thing I didn't like is the outro. I love her. She wants me over and over and over again for about 30, 40 seconds. It was okay. This song's a little more upbeat, so it's a step in the right direction. It's better than anything else I've heard on the album so far. And I would say that's due to the bass and leaving the piano pretty much non-existent on this song, but it's a little more upbeat, which is in the right direction, I guess. So that moves us on to the next song. This Will Be Our Year, written by Chris White, sang by Colin Blunstone. This one was released as a single in the U.S. with This Will Be Our Year as the B-side, but it did not chart. Possibly, I did a lot of research on this, but it's possibly about a newer, renewed love and the optimism of what is to come in their relationship. And this is the shortest song on the whole album, at just over 2 minutes long. So what did you think about This Will Be Our Year?
I think it's a song full of optimism, and it's really upbeat. Looking forward to a good year together. It does hint that there might have been some struggles in years gone by, whether they were alone, whether they were together. It's not really spelled out. It leaves a lot for the imagination. Nice, short little song. I don't really have much more to say about it, though. What about you?
I mean, it's another piano intro, to get back to that goes into drumming, which isn't too bad. It's a little more upbeat. I mean, very least side 2 has been more upbeat on the songs than side 1 was. Nothing really special to me. You know, the thing I wrote down is lack of guitar. We're in 9 songs into this album, British Invasion, and I haven't heard hardly a whisper of guitar. So that's really hard for me to hear because I've heard a lot of piano.
Yeah, well, that's going to throw you for a huge loop when you get to the next song.
Yeah. So the next song, Butcher's Tale, Western Front 1914. This was written by Chris White and sang by Chris White, which is the only lead vocal Chris White ever sang for the Zombies. It's a very experimental song, and they use the Mellotron. And this Mellotron's a very famous Mellotron left in EMI Studios. It's John Lennon's Mellotron.
Oh.
So that's about the only special thing about this song.
And, this is that accordion sounding thing.
Yeah, it was released as a single in the U.S. with This Will Be Our Year as the B-side. It did not chart. It would have surprised me if it did. It's an anti-war song set during World War I, which Chris White had a ton of interest in World War I. But many people thought it was more of a reference to the Vietnam War, obviously, that was going on at the time. But, I mean, war protest is war protest, right?
War in general ought to be avoided.
I agree. So, Butcher's Tale, what are your thoughts on this one?
This song's out of left field. It does not fit the album whatsoever. This has nothing to do with any of the other songs. Doesn't sound like any of the other songs. And I feel like I'm ripping the crap out of this song, and yet I love this song. I like World War I myself, and he's got some really amazing imagery in there, singing about, he's singing one of his friends that he knew back home, who's now hanging on the barbed wire, lifeless. Like, he's wondering if the priest that came to pray over them saw all the flies buzzing around, if he would still pray the same way. It's gritty. It's a dirty song, and I loved it. And it doesn't belong on the album. That's where I'm at. Where are you?
Well, I'll say I'm ashamed John Lennon's Mellotron was on this song.
Yeah.
Complete opposite of you. I didn't like anything about this song. I do like the sound of the Mellotron, I guess, so I did like something. I like that intro, and maybe not even so much liked it, just the fact that they did something different than the damn piano was okay. You know, the lyrics are very muddy in this. I think if anything, the lyrics are good and strong, like you said, and very gritty. Yeah. But the vocals I can hear are not good. The vocal is not good. There's a reason Chris White is not the singer and shouldn't be. I read that they tried to record this with Colin Blunstone, but his vocal didn't fit up with it very well.
Mm-hmm.
And that really concerns me because I think Chris White is a horrible singer and it was mixed poorly. And I like the words to it. I do. I like it's a good story.
They should have just allowed Chris White to hang this song on the fridge.
And I actually disagree with you on the fact that it doesn't belong on this album. You know, maybe because it's got a Mellotron intro and not a piano, but this is a weird ass song.
There's no guitar.
There's no guitar. There's no nothing. To me, it belongs on this album so far because this album, 10 songs into a 12-song album, has been disappointing to me.
And so this song belongs on the album because it's also disappointing.
So let's move on to Friends of Mine. Now, this one was written by Chris White and sang by Colin Blunstone. Now, this one I did put does sound Beatle-esque to a certain point. This is a very upbeat song. The band names a bunch of couples they knew, and they're actual couples they knew that were in love.
Oh, that's fun.
And somebody had asked him a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, you know, are they still in love? And I guess only one of the couples are still together. They've either divorced or they're dead.
Oh, wow.
So take that for what it is. So what did you think of Friends of Mine?
Oh, this is a fun song. It's fun to watch people in love, you know, especially young love that's new. Yes, it is an upbeat song. Yes, it is a Beatles sounding song. So I'm with you on both of those counts. I like that outro where they sing or where they list all the couples, the real life couples that they know. Boy, that's kind of heartbreaking to find out that only one couple was still together and still in love. The rest of them hang them, I guess. But man, this was a decent song. Fits the album.
Yeah, and see, I didn't think this one fit the album at all. I thought it was pretty upbeat, and he actually had a little guitar to open it up, which I'm like, holy shit, what's that?
Doesn't fit the album
And
at
it's
all
a
'cause
faster
got
pop
guitar.
song, and you know, the thing I didn't like about this song was the complete stop at the end. It just cut. I don't know, but I thought this was the most 11 songs in this album. I thought this was the most upbeat, just kind of rock and roll poppy sounding song to me.
All right.
That moves us on to the last song on the album, which is, I would say, probably the most well-known song and probably what most well-known song by the Zombies.
It's the only one I've heard.
Yeah, it's written by Rod Argent, sang by Colin Blunstone, and it's Time of the Season. Like I said, most recognized song by them on this album for certain, and possibly their most recognizable song. Now, Rod Argent has said in interviews the song was inspired by George Gershwin's jazz standard Summertime, which if you've heard that song, it's a pretty decent song. The band actually released that song, a cover on that song on their first album. This song does, if you listen and lyrics really careful, it reminisces through the whole album about the seasons and the times changing and things like that. This is kind of a roundup of everything on the album. This song is the song that did cause a rift in the studio between Blunstone and Argent. Argent had written the song and Blunstone was singing it. Blunstone was having a hard time hitting the higher notes, and I guess it was pissing Argent off. And they
up there.
about come to fisticuffs with it. So this song was released as a single initially and didn't do anything. But then it was released as a single in 1969, basically 2 years after they had recorded it, after the band had been broken up for a year, and it had Friends of Mine as the B-side, and it was a hit. It hit number 3 in the U.S., number 1 in Canada. It is certified gold in the U.S. I'm sure you've heard this song if you've listened to any rock and roll radio, or classic rock radio. There you go. After this song become a surprise hit, because it was in the U.S., the band had broken up, so they decided to get the band back together and tour, but they did it without Colin Blunstone, and they couldn't get anybody's vocals to sound the same, and so it was very, very short-lived. And a lot of people think this album even, and this song and everything here, maybe it was just, a lot of people said this song was a hit a couple years after it was recorded. Maybe they were ahead of their time. I disagree. I think this is just the only good song on the album, and that's why it was a hit. It's been covered by a lot of bands, most famously the Guess Who do a very good rendition of it. What do you think of Time of the Season?
This song, it is their most popular. It's their most well-known. This is a song that, it's the only one that I've heard before on this album. And so I'm familiar with it. This is your stereotypical keyboard, strong, hippie music about Summer of Love type stuff. And I think that's why people really latched onto it, because of Summer of Love, this was very reminiscent of that era. So, but yeah, it's up there with the vocals. They hit some high notes, and Rod Argent, little Tim Burton, I don't know why he keeps it up there so high, but
He just wrote the lyrics.
Oh, just wrote the lyrics?
Yeah, it was Colin Blunstone that sings,
Oh.
which is what caused the rift,
Yeah.
because Rod Argent was trying to get Colin to hit those notes, and he was having a hard time, and I guess was pissing Argent off.
And I mean, you can only ask so much of people.
Yeah.
You don't really think about it too much, but when you listen to the song, you know, and this is the song goes, "What's your name? Who's your daddy? And is he rich like me?" This is a song that's very weird. This is a song that should strike me to the core with as odd and weird as sounding as it is, and how much I love songs like that. Yeah, it's not one of my favorites. Where do you stand on this one?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I like this song. I've always liked it. It's the only song I like on the album. It does suffer a little bit of overplay to a certain extent, but that's overplay in the Zombies. I mean, a lot of people couldn't even tell you who the Zombies are, right?
Sure.
It's got a great recognizable intro. It has the best intro on the whole album because it's not piano. It's got the good keyboard and stuff in it. And I think the keyboard throughout is great. It's got little guitar licks in it that are nice to hear finally. It's kind of reminiscent for me because I've liked this song since I was real young. I did a lot of poetry in high school and stuff, and I made a poetry book, and the name of my poetry book was Time of the Season.
Oh.
And so it kind of, for me, has a special feeling there. The keyboard solos, it has 2 different breaks where it does keyboard solos, and I think those are really good. It's the first time in the album anything solos over anything, which I really like, and the bass is very heavy and it's mixed. And the one thing I can say about this song, whether you like it or don't, this song is produced the best. You can hear the instruments, you can hear the vocals, everything's mixed forward, it sounds good, where the other ones always have either the vocals are muddy or the instruments are muddy, and it's almost like they put time and effort into this one, but not the other ones. I think this is a quintessential 60s British invasion sound, and I wish this album had more of this, but it is what it is. So do you want to get to winners and losers?
I think so.
Winners and losers.
I'm going to go with 2 and 2. 2 least favorites.
You're going to go with 2 least and 2 favorites. Give me your 2 least first.
Surprisingly, Time of the Season was one of my least favorites, and that should have been one of my favorites. But dang it, Rod Argent, you weird little man, you've lost me. Okay, I don't get you, little Tim Burton guy. You're odd, you're weird. I have no idea what you're trying to say in this song. Did he compose it, or who did the
Yeah, he wrote it and composed it.
Okay, you've got some ability, you've got some talent, you little schmuck. But man,
well, you know, Colin Blunstone did not like this song.
That's fair,
and didn't want it released or something like that. And maybe that had more to do with because it was Argent's song and they'd fought over it or something like that. Yeah. But yeah, he didn't think the song was very good, which really makes me lose credibility for him and you, but go ahead.
That's fine. My other least favorite is Hung Up on a Dream. Just too busy of a song. It was a mess. I couldn't understand what they were saying, and everything just kind of jumbled together. That being my opinions, where do you stand on your least favorites?
Every song is my least favorite except
the first 11.
Except the final 2. I like the final 2 songs, all right. The 2 worst, I didn't like Butcher's Tale, even though you did. To me, it just, number one, nothing fits on this album for me personally. I'm not understanding this album. Butcher's Tale and Changes, those 2 songs were by far the worst, but pick any of the other 10 and call it good, but those 2 are the worst. What are your 2 favorites?
Butcher's Tale.
Well, I knew that's where we were going to be.
Yeah. It was one of my favorites. It just does not fit on this album for me. That doesn't match up. Chris White, I love your passion for World War I. Love your writing. You are also a weird little guy, but I'm also very anti-war myself. You
should have not been allowed to borrow John Lennon's Mellotron,
You
Chris.
shouldn't have.
Or whoever played it. I don't know who played it.
Doesn't matter. Nobody in this band should be touching John Lennon's Mellotron. My other favorite, Brief Candles. This was a song that really made me think. Tying with Brief Candles is Care of Cell 44. I love that weird little song.
Well, that's kind of funny of you because you like the weird little song from Argent, but Time of the Season is weird.
I know, that's a weird one too, and I should love it, and I don't know why. Why am I the way I am?
I'm not sure.
Why is Rod Argent the way he is? Why is Tim Burton the way he is? These are things that I will never have an answer to.
I get it.
You have one favorite on here?
Well, I think Time of the Season by far is my favorite song, but if I was to pick another one as my favorite, was the song right before that, Friends of Mine.
Okay.
I thought it was a very upbeat song.
Yeah.
It had a little guitar to open. It was a little faster, and that's the kind of stuff I'm into. I thought those two songs, I don't know, side one was, it's kind of funny because I thought side one was very poor compared to side two, but the two songs I like the least are on side two, but the two songs I like the most are on side two, but that's about the only songs that I really enjoyed. A couple other songs had sections that I liked, but they just didn't come together for me, and way too much piano in the first 9 songs.
Yeah, one nugget of corn is not enough to make it turn appetizing.
Yeah, exactly. Should we get to the album rating?
Yeah.
Album rating.
Okay, Ty, tell them how this goes.
Okay, so with if this is your first time listening, we have a 0 to 10 scale. And on the 0 end, it's the worst, and we burned the album. We haven't had to burn any albums yet, and you won't even know if we do. We're just going to say we will if we hit a 0. If, on the other hand, we have a 10, then I have to buy the album. Once again, you won't know if I actually buy it or not, and it's not anybody's business. Hey, I'll say, if it's a 10, I'm going to buy the album.
You've lived up to your promise so far.
I have. Where we stand, 5 being smack dab in the middle, I'm giving this album a 3. And that's an optimistic 3. Time of the Season and a couple of other moments in this album, not even a couple other full songs.
Now, you said you didn't like Time of the Season.
I know. I'm a walking conundrum, even though I'm sitting down. It doesn't make any sense. None of this in this album makes any sense. Look at the album cover, and that doesn't make any sense either. I'm not going to make any sense with my rating. What is your esteem of this?
Like I stated earlier, I've listened to the Zombies hits for years. I believe I purchased the Zombies greatest hits years ago, and it was all right. It has their few songs that are heard on radio still nowadays, and some others that weren't bad. I've heard for a lot of years that this album was highly considered, nowadays as being a classic. And
Whoa.
I would like to know who that is, because I don't know if it's my mood. I don't know if it's the kind of music I like. I love Time of the Season. And I said that if I heard that song, like I have in the past, as a sample of this album, I would be looking for more. And that's what I did. That's why we listened to this album, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
We threw this vinyl on because I want to hear more what the Zombies have to offer. I no longer want to hear what the Zombies have to offer. I do not consider this album a classic. I give it a 3. That's based on one song and maybe another a tiny bit, and that's the most I can go. This album does not resonate with me. I don't get it, and I'm sorry for the people that offends, but this to me is not a good album. I won't be revisiting it.
Not even for A Butcher's Tale.
No, not even for A Butcher's Tale. That's for certain. So,
oh boy, yeah, Zombies. You have talent. The band's got talent.
Well, Rod Argent has talent. I mean, he went and
Sure.
formed another band, and I've listened to, they had the famous song "Hold Your Head Up," which is well known, and not many others. But I've listened to some Argent songs, and they're decent.
Yeah.
They're pretty rocking songs. And you know me, I'm into guitars, but I can be taken away from that. You look at Pet Sounds, you look at certain other albums and songs from the Beatles that aren't guitar driven, and I like them because they're good compositions.
Sure.
This album just is not good, in my opinion. But if you disagree with us, or you agree with us, or you want to tell us your feelings, send us an email to classicvinylpodcast@gmail.com. Reach out to us anytime you'd like. Give us suggestions on albums you'd like to hear us review, or whatever you want to say to us. We'll read it on the air. And we really appreciate you listening to us, because we know there's a lot of podcasts out there you could listen to, and we're just a couple idiots that don't know what we're doing. But I do know I don't like this album. So until next time.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you so much for listening to Classic Vinyl Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Classic Vinyl Podcast for updates, and also share us with your music-loving friends.
Bye.